Yeast belong to the kingdom of fungi and the phylum of ascomycota, otherwise known as sac fungi. Sac fungi generally do not fruit or reproduce in the same way as mycelium fungi, which produce mushrooms. Sac fungi form what are called ascospores, which for most species of sac fungi are groups of 8 spores called an ascus. Each individual spore in an ascus is simply called an ascospore. The spores will produce asexually by means of meiosis, and from one spore undergoing meiosis, a full ascus of 8 ascospores will be reproduced. However, only some sac fungi are asexual. Others undergo more complicated processes. Occurring in the microscopic level, you can see how rapid sac fungi can reproduce and spread, if each single spore can produce 8 from itself. On top of this, sac fungi can survive harsh conditions and therefore travel great distances. They typically grow best in humid and acidic environments. As a footnote, it should be understood that the phylum of ascomycota, which comes from the Greek ascos, meaning wineskin, or sac, makes up the majority of all fungi. These fungi have existed for hundreds of millions of years, evolving from earlier fungi that existed at least 1.5 billion years ago on Earth, likely originating from water. These dates are, as far as we know, I think they're probably much, much older. Around that time frame, fungi became the dominant life form on land, before terrestrial plants even existed. From that period on, or even before, fungi colonized, terraformed, and domesticated the world. Fungi in general were the main cause for oxygenating the planet. They broke down minerals, rocks, and metals that ultimately allowed plants and animals to ever evolve and exist in the first place. Their spores can create rainfall, which of course is the perfect weather for fungi to grow and reproduce, since they like humidity and moisture. Their ability to diversify, spread, and thrive in harsh conditions has seen them terraform the Earth after every mass extinction or ice age event. Saying that life wouldn't have evolved past aquatic prokaryotes without fungi is probably fair, and I think fungi's role in the ocean is even understated. Mycology is already such a small field of study, I can't imagine ocean-based mycology is any further along. To top it all off, fungal fossils are the hardest to find because they are microscopic and easily biodegradable. The couple that have been found have drastically changed our understanding of early evolution and planetary formation, so who knows what else we're missing from that 1.5 billion years or more of fungal evolution. So from the beginning of terrestrial nature, the kingdoms of plant and animal, which derive from fungi, have been and are inoculated with different kinds of fungi. Saying that animals and plants are fungal creatures is not a wrong statement. Maybe more accurately, you can say that nature has been cultivated by fungi. We are complex fruiting bodies of fungal organisms, used as a vessel to host fungal laboratories until the time of our death, where we are a food source fueling billions of more spores. And let me expand on that. And we're just going to talk about humans, though this can apply to pretty much every animal or plant. Our bodies are composed of many chemical reactors we call organs and organ systems. By diversifying roles and specializing in those roles, single-celled organisms could combine to form multicellular organisms where functions are carried out individually to work together. It started as separate organisms, but through time and evolution became a single cohesive organism. That's how we view it. But we don't actually control our digestive system, our breathing, hormone regulation, blood flow, heart pump, muscle growth. And obviously we can influence and affect it, but the background processes occur separately from the ego or the conscious thought form of the self. There is also no part of the body that doesn't resemble some form, appearance, or function of a fungus already existing. Our brains, our stomach, liver, kidney, heart, reproductive organs, skin, even on the cellular level, fungus is structured the same as our cells. Nerve roots are remarkably similar to the hyphae or the mycelium of a fungus. Lichens are a barely understood fungal symbiosis of multiple different kingdoms of life that function as a single organism or colony of organisms. Humans should be viewed with this understanding. We're basically lichens, just developed in a very different way from the typical lichen organism as we understand. In every human is fungi. Albican and Candida are two common fungal symbiotes we have in us from likely the time of embryonic development. There are many more, and it varies from person to person, but fungi is not something we can live without. Further adding to the idea of us being domesticated. These fungi in us and a part of us are sac fungi, and types of yeasts are the primary classification. So let's talk about yeast, the great gods of Devour, and you'll see why I titled this so dramatically in a little bit. The internal system of an organism, like a human, is very weak. The individual cell walls of these organs are susceptible to enzymes that could destroy them in days. Yeast, being a fungal spore that has inoculated the very air, means that these organ systems have to develop some form of protection. This again applies to every plant, animal, and insect. Skin and chitin are the result. We need this protective layer because yeast devours everything it comes into contact with. This is why mold grows on food you leave outside or on a kitchen counter. The spores are already there in the air, and it's just a matter of time before they begin to feast on whatever food is sitting on the counter. And yes, that means we breathe in spores every single day. It's on our skin, it's in our digestive system, our lungs, everywhere. Going back to your food and leftovers, yeasts are facultative anaerobes. This means they can survive with or without oxygen, and the byproducts of their consumption changes depending on the presence or lack of oxygen. And that's why sealed and refrigerated food will still grow mold. Fermentation is where we get alcohol, and is a result of a no-oxygen environment. Fruit in nature will ferment because there's already some type of yeasts inside the fruit, because again, it's essentially symbiotic or inoculated in everything. Given enough time and the right circumstances, it will ferment naturally. There are still other bacteria and whatnot that can affect the fermentation process, so it's not always guaranteed. But yeast is where we get carbonated drinks, alcohol, vinegar, and many cheeses and yogurts and breads. There are so many different species. Some of them make edible foods, and some of them make moldy, poisonous foods. But that fermentation process of the devouring yeast is what domesticated humans. Because of beer, humans settled down and formed communities around the cultivation of grain and then its subsequent fermentation. We had access to resources filled with nutrients, vitamins, conservation and purification of water, as well as a good time. And now we need to understand a very important misconception about fermentation. While fermentation is a unique process of yeast to convert sugar to alcohol, it is a form of decomposition. It is the breaking down of sugar and the release of CO2 that gives us the byproduct ethanol. It's a fairly complex biochemical process, but decomposition nonetheless. Decomposition is death. To the devouring fungi, death is irrelevant. It's not a state of anything, but a process of decomposition, a process of eating. To understand this, let us examine the decomposition of a human body. When preserved, the body does not decompose, which means decomposition is not a guarantee. It's not an immutable process of existence. It's a specific act of yeast and other bacteria and whatnot, eating a body, whether plant or animal. Your immune system and skin is what stops you from being devoured immediately. Death is what happens when yeast finally breaks through your body's defenses and eats you either from the inside out or the outside in. We know that fungus during fermentation and decomposition releases different gases. Corpses can actually explode from the decomposition process as gases build up, much like so-called bottle bombs, where a brewer seals a drink before the yeast dies, and the yeast keeps fermenting, building up the CO2 until the glass bottle explodes from the pressure. And we can observe this happening to corpses as well. This is why beached whale carcasses can explode, because they're exposed to yeast now that they're on the surface of the land, and the yeast decomposes their body and builds up all those gases internally. In the human digestive system, the food's broken down by enzymes, bacteria, and yeast can cause gas and bloating. Exactly what we'd expect of a yeast when it's given a heavily sugar and acidic diet. In fact, there is a syndrome called autobrewery syndrome, where sugar is actually fermented inside your digestive system, causing you to be intoxicated merely from eating sugar. I believe this is a bit misleading, because the idea of a sugar high or a sugar rush, which occurs when you eat a lot of sugar at one time, is that same fermentation process. The yeast in your digestive system is breaking down that sugar and converting it into alcohol inside of your digestive system. And now we have to think about the digestive system, which is sometimes called the second brain, and its possible relation to the yeast that inhabit it. The reason some of these unhealthy, sugary, and fatty, acidic foods are addicting to us is because the more we eat it, the more yeast that can grow in us, and the more we need to feed the yeast. Fungi's relationship with electromagnetic pathways is seen in mycelium networks already, and their increase in growth during electrical storms, so we know they can interact with nerves. Think of mycotoxins as well, which is something like black mold that can affect your brain, because fungus is already adept at dealing with or interacting with electrical impulses and neurons. So when you get like sugar cravings, it's, I think, likely that it's the yeast tapping into your nerves that exist in your digestive system and basically asking for sugar. Diseases and sickness should be understood in the context of yeast and other fungi. When the body is lacking nutrition and in severe starvation, the stomach becomes bloated dangerously. A result of yeast eating through the digestive system, the basis of the old wives' tale of if you don't eat food, your stomach will eat itself. The bloating being the typical byproduct we see when yeast consumes something. When the immune system is compromised like this, you become prone to infections, skin issues are abundant, mental problems develop, bones weaken, blood is damaged, so on and so forth. This is mostly from fungi coming from inside you, and the fungi in the air around you being able to attack and eat the body, which is decomposition. More and more mental disorders and diseases are being traced to dietary problems. But now we need to trace dietary problems to fungal issues in the body. Humans need to maintain homeostasis in order to function at its best. We cannot survive without fungi, and we cannot survive with too much fungi eating us. This balance is maintained at ideal internal temperatures, hydration, and the proper pH acid-base level. As remember, fungi thrive in an acid but don't do well in base environments. So the desert and the ocean are two environments that give fungi the most difficulty, for most of the common species anyways. This is because of the salt natural to those places. The Olmecs learned to mummify their dead because they found that corpses did not decompose when covered by the sand in their deserts. The environment was not ideal for yeast and other fungi to decompose the body completely. It's why, in general, animal corpses last longer in the desert. The Egyptians, during their mummification processes, used a substance similar to sodium bicarbonate, otherwise known as baking soda, to preserve their dead from rot. In fact, before we had refrigeration, salt was used to keep food from going bad. This works because food or corpses don't have a natural shelf life. There isn't an internal clock deciding that food will just go bad after a certain period. Food goes bad when yeast infects it. Salt, therefore, can create a situation where yeast cannot live in. This is why ocean water has healing qualities on wounds and restoring healthy pH for acidic people. It purges the body of yeasts that have worked their way into wounds and sores. Baking soda is a relatively cheap source of sodium bicarbonate, and some studies show that it is excellent in fighting fungi on and in the body. There are reported cases of baking soda being used to kill cancer. This works because cancer is fungal as well. In a recent case, there was a man who injected himself with psilocybin tea into his veins. Days later, his body was ravaged by fungus actually growing in his bloodstream. I believe he survived after emergency treatment, and I can say with confidence that his body would have successfully fruited into actual mushrooms of some sort had he not gotten help when he did. At that point, I cannot imagine he would have lived through it, but it goes to show just how close fungal and human cells really are. Most common illnesses, and even the extremely rare ones that you'll see on like the Health Channel, are fungal in nature, if not directly fungal, and they should be studied and treated accordingly. Pay attention to what the body looks like under many of these infections and illnesses, especially these 1 in a million mysterious ones. The structure is fungal. This is perhaps another interesting fact that may convince you, but almost all edible mushrooms are anti-cancer, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and packed with nutrients that are almost exactly what the body needs in the right proportions. But then you have something like sugar and other acidic foods that are linked to so many health problems. Your ability to manage the fungi in the body is what will make you healthy and young. Age and sickness are the byproduct of yeast consumption and attacks in the body. I imagine when mycology becomes a more widely accepted and applied field of study, baking soda and other similar products, which are usually pretty cheap, will become staples for survival and medical supplies for anyone at home in the wilderness, refugees during war, or wounds and accidents. The correct use and precise chemistry needs to be studied in relation to the situation, of course, but all the data here suggests we should be learning and testing this. When we apply this lens of mycology and yeast onto every different field, we start to see some interesting behaviors, especially from ancient humans. Through etymology, we can actually see that diseases, illnesses, infections, mental issues, infertility, and so forth were equated and personified as demons, evil spirits, curses, and hexes of all varieties. And the depictions, of course, vary between cultures. And then you have healing commands, magic, spells, protective crystals, and talismans, guardian spirits, and angels, which were the cures to these demonic forces. This is known to us purely from etymological studies into ancient practices and superstitions and the origins of our current use of these words. Someone with leprosy or seizures or gangrene would have been said to be possessed by an evil spirit or a demon or whatever equivalent in other cultures. To cure this, a magi or a shaman or a wise man or a witch would identify the demon by name and then use the appropriate angel or spell to cure it, most often in the form of an herbal remedy or a chemical substance of some sort, like the well-known and popularized circle of salt to ward off evil spirits. With this proper context, we can see how the circle of salt developed as a preventative for evil spirits because these disease-causing spirits cannot enter into overly base environments. One way or another, ancient people figured out that the chemical properties of certain special substances countered the evil disease-causing spirits and curses. Certainly, fungi are invisible as they mainly remain on the microscopic level until they're fruiting or infesting something. Various crystals contain types of antifungal properties or otherwise are unable to rot, what we call rust, which again is actually fungus breaking down metals or minerals. But things like gold and silver tend to be fungal resistant. This again is where the idea of crystals containing all these metaphysical properties originally comes from. The reason magi and witches had to name the demon and the herb or angel they were invoking is because a lot of this herbal knowledge was secretive, and it was also believed that unless provoked or commanded by name, these cures would not work. While this isn't necessarily relevant to the video, it's these folk names for all these types of diseases and herbs that tell us that the spirits, both good and evil, occupied these objects or diseases in the belief of these ancient people. Looking into Haddo and water consciousness and ancient fermentation rituals may give us further support to the intelligence of fungi on a level humans are frankly not ready to accept. To sum it up really quick, ancient fermentation rituals involved singing, dancing, feasts, or solemn quiet to, depending on the culture, to invoke the spirits of the brew that they were trying to make, which is ultimately yeast. Words are thought of as magic to the ancient Egyptians and to many other ancient nations. Perhaps these sound frequencies have a role to play in this fungal world of ours. It turns out different frequencies and rhythms of sound can actually destroy microscopic organisms or encourage their growth. Royal rife frequencies are said to cure many diseases and cancer in the pseudoscience realm. Yet if we understand these diseases to be fungal in nature, we can test the frequency to match the species of fungus and possibly destroy it without any harm or intrusion to the body. The world is filled with unexplainable phenomena and cures of miraculous healing. Think of Christian miracles of a pond or a river said to be able to cure diseases miraculously. This miracle is in fact just antifungal bacteria present in the water. So when people drink it, their disease or illness is cured. As I've explored in other videos, psychedelic fungus have given us many of our religions, and furthermore, we can see how fungus is the basis of non-corporeal spiritual phenomena even from ancient times. Gods and demons and angels dwelt among them, not in some other dimension, but often in the corners of their house or in the darkness of forests. In short, where fungus lives. In a very literal sense, yeasts are the gods of Devour to ancient man, even if they were named differently. Today, through our understanding of mycology, we are not learning that ancient man's views were wrong, but precisely correct. Fungus are the dominators of this planet, the gods, if you will. We just need to translate demons, angels, spirits, and the many different gods into the proper fungus that they're describing. And suddenly you get this new perspective of ancient mythology, religion, and rituals. And now I want to get into some conjecture and thought experiments to consider as we continue to view different fields of study through mycology. And right now I want to talk about astronomy. Interestingly enough, and this isn't part of the conjecture, but spores can actually survive space. And now this opens a whole new slew of speculation. Does fungus come from different planets? Did our planet's fungus arrive from some asteroid or riding on some cosmic storm? I imagine, too, that fungus is a universal organism. Where there is life, there is fungus. Given how old the supposed age of the universe is, it would be no surprise if fungus has spread to many regions of different galaxies. You could probably use this for a science fiction story, but planets could even be fungal spores, and the planet develops its fungus, creating atmospheric layers before reaching a bigger and bigger mass. This is how something can go from a planet to a gas giant until finally combusting into a star, basically through the fermentation of the planet itself, until it reaches that critical mass. Fungus can learn how to consume radiation for energy, as with the radiotrophic fungus found in Chernobyl. Perhaps even that Big Bang event, if it is accurate, is nothing more than an ascospore releasing these celestial spores, cosmic dust. These grow into planets and then stars. Or maybe even each black hole is a spore or fungus of some sort. Like I said, this last part is just for fun, just to see what we come up with using mycology and everything. I will also say that if you want to terraform a planet and make it habitable, you can do so with fungus in a remarkable amount of time. And I actually had a dream about this where I was part of a colony of humans who traveled on a space citadel and landed on this barren planet. We didn't know what to do until we came up with the idea of releasing spores onto the planet. In the dream, it was like the next scene, there were trees and animals and giant fungi just sprouting off the ground in like a time lapse, just instantaneously, like a fully grown environment. But for us, if we wanted to terraform, let's say Mars, I would suggest bringing a sample of Martian soil and creating a laboratory environment to mimic the Martian atmosphere, and then releasing different spores and seeing which ones thrive and break down the soil, converting it to raw resources and gases so that they can build an atmosphere. And even if initially spores don't do well, we have learned that with incredible speed, a fungus can evolve to be able to consume a new material in a new environment with astounding speed. Different fungi today are being taught how to eat toxic trash, which converts it to an edible mushroom. Fungi really are masters of terraforming and chemistry. But if you train this fungal spore, ideally multiple, so you can have a diverse collection to use, you cultivate them until you have maybe billions or trillions or even more, and then you send them on a rocket back to Mars. And if going to Mars first and bringing back samples of the soil is too resource taxing, we could probably just send a wide variety of spores and leave a drone down there and see what happens and which ones do well, and then you can keep sending more. In terms of time frame, let's break it down. When Earth was first forming, it was a chaotic mess of volcano, asteroids, and severe storms. So it took fungus a lot of time to reel that in and tone it down and create a stable atmosphere. With Mars, we have a cold, dead planet, but one that already went through that process of forming and possibly even its own cycle of life. But the fungus we have here are evolved over 1 billion years and are highly adaptable, complex organisms. I believe with the right species used and a large quantity of these spores, we could terraform Mars in decades, at least to a good baseline to start adding in seeds of other organisms that are still highly durable and adaptive. But once you start getting rainfall, you're pretty much in the clear, I think, and it's a straight shot for building an oxygenated, hospitable planet. Now, whether terraforming a planet with yeasts causes them to evolve into this Martian alien fungi that destroys the planet, that would be an obvious sign that the whole thing was a bad idea. But the yeast gods are already in control of this planet anyways, and who knows, if they have a mycorrhizal symbiosis with our brains, they could be directing our efforts toward interstellar travel so they can move to devour worlds other than our own. Thanks for watching.